Hi guys, time for another weekly update, and kind of quite a quiet week this week, which is feels kind of odd to say because it's also been quite a busy week. But I've been doing a lot of work for a particular customer with their custom deployment solution. So yeah, it's been kind of a busy week for me, but it also doesn't feel like there's been an awful lot happening sort of outside that world of the stuff I've been concentrating on. But been a couple of big announcements, so we can definitely look at those. The first one is Visual Studio 2017. So this is kind of a big deal for developers everywhere, really. You don't have to be a Skype for Business developer, even if you just dabble and do the occasional bits and pieces. This is still a pretty big deal. Visual Studio is, the classic. It's the IDE of choice, really, on certainly on the Windows stack. It's got everything you ever need in it, and it can do so much. And it's been really interesting actually to see the different editions evolve. There always used to be different flavors of things like professional and enterprise, but those have kind of, and ultimate was another one as well. They've been kind of been collapsed down a little bit now. We still have enterprise, but we also have this community, Visual Studio community, which is free, and it's pretty fully featured. If you're on the edge of not sure whether you want to fork out for Visual Studio, if you're looking around at different IDEs because you're worried about the price tag, I would definitely take a look at community. You can do an awful lot in community. And of course, Visual Studio Code, the kind of really cut down version that has also been ported to, I think, Mac, and I want to say Linux as well. Anyway, Visual Studio 2017, and that kind of brings out a bunch of updates across the board, really. Way too many to mention here, and they've been covered much better elsewhere. The kind of standout feature for me, I think, has to be the stuff they've done with null references. I've done a fair bit of development. I've been around the block a couple of times now. By a long shot, number one cause of problems is nulls. And I know there's anti-null patterns now, and should we even really be using nulls? The reality is today we still use nulls. Nulls are still a thing in code, and they still trip us up all the time. And the classic problem as somebody called in to debug some code or a program that's not working, or even in your own code, you're trying to track down a problem, and you track it down to this object reference null error. But of course, you don't know which object is null. So then there's the kind of bit of a guessing game, bit of detective work to try and work that stuff out. It kind of looks like from the things we've seen, and I haven't had a chance to play with this yet, but it looks like when those null reference exceptions are caught, in the exception message is the object, the name of the object that is null, and that's huge. That's really, really useful information. Sometimes you're not looking at these problems in like a debug and run scenario where you can stick a breakpoint in and then examine the object. Sometimes this stuff is live and it's just login code you're looking at, or you're looking at event tracing, or you're trying to work out what's going on from the little information you have. And if all you have is an exception and a stack trace, knowing that there's an object reference null is really frustrating because it's really hard to know where to look next. So having the name of the variable in is huge. I think it's going to make a really big difference. So I'm pretty excited about that. Other news. So Microsoft Teams, we have a date for when it's going generally available. That date is March the 14th at 8:30 in the morning if you are Pacific time. So I believe that's kind of the afternoon time for the UK, early evening for the rest of Europe. That's pretty, I'd say that seems fairly fast for a Microsoft product to go from public preview into beta. And don't get me wrong, when it went public preview, it was pretty fully featured. Microsoft did a great job of keeping it under wraps actually until the preview. So it's really good to see that it's going GA. It's gonna be a big deal for companies, like large companies that need to wait for GA for things like licensing and support and stuff like that. So that's good to see. I'm just reading the invitation. So there's going to be an announcement about what's new in Microsoft Teams. So that's good because it makes it sound like they might be announcing some new stuff. And there's going to be a special guest as well, but we don't know who that is. So that's something to look forward to. Put in your calendars, and I imagine there'll be an online. Oh, it says there'll be an online event, so we can all live stream it and take to Twitter and talk about it then. So that's certainly what I'm planning on doing. I don't know what the hashtag is. I guess it's probably hashtag Microsoft Teams or something, but I'm sure we'll work it out on the day, and we'll give our commentary from the sidelines. So that's pretty interesting. Another interesting thing is some updates to the Microsoft Graph API. So I've talked about the Microsoft Graph API before, but it's a bit like an API to get data out of your organization. So it's good for querying AD, calendar, free busy things. You can look into Delve, all that kind of stuff for really getting that sort of metadata about your organization. Graph API is really good for that. And then they've been doing some updates to it as well. Lots of changes across the board, but one of them is the new feature that they're rolling out into preview today, which is the ability for you to add your own information into Graph alongside the kind of standard information that Microsoft give you. And that's really cool, and that's really interesting because it means you can start to attach user data that means things for your applications, and you can attach them essentially into almost like stick them next to AD. You put them into the Graph API and get them back again later. They do it with an extension to the schema definition. So that's that makes sense. You adhere to their schema extension definition. You can add new types in and new information, and then you can call it in the APIs and to sort of place the information there and also get it back again. And that's really interesting. That's really kind of exciting. I think the only other thing I wanted to share with you a link for was something that I saw that's really cool done with HoloLens. And there's lots of interesting use cases with HoloLens. There's lots of interesting things going on with HoloLens, most of which I don't kind of take a massive interest in. It's interesting and exciting and cool for sure, but it's not something I know a great deal about. But I picked up on this one because there was a good bit of AI tech in there as well. Now, if you remember from the Terminator Arnie had his head-up display, the kind of red tinted one. There's a scene, I want to say he walks into the bar and kind of assesses the guy, and all the stats are on the screen, and it locks onto him as a person and gives you all the stats about him and all that kind of stuff. Somebody's done a mock-up of that using HoloLens, which is cool by itself, don't get me wrong. In itself, that's amazing. But they've taken it one step further for sure. So what they've done is they've linked it up to some of the cognitive services APIs. So if you've got this HoloLens thing on, you've got the head-up display, you feel like Arnie, you look at something like a cat or something, and you've got cognitive services API looking at the video and looking at the stream as well. And it's posting all that data off to Cognitive Services API. Cognitive Services API is looking at that and saying, that's a picture of a cat. And then what they're doing is taking that information, distilling it down and putting it on the screen next to you. So you get this amazing kind of, as you look around, analyzing the world and giving it back to you, which is incredible. And they go on to do some OCR stuff as well. So as he's kind of looking at a book, it's taking the text, throwing it out onto the screen in front of him. Now that's all sounds a little bit gimmicky, but imagine what that could do. Imagine you could open a French book and, HoloLens could look at it and go, well, I know that's French. I know my user is not French. My user is English. They probably want me to translate that for them. And I'll just overlay it on top. Pretty cool, huh? So nothing to do with bots, nothing to do with Skype for Business. I noticed it in passing because it was some cognitive services, artificial intelligence stuff, but I thought it was really cool. And so I thought I'd share it with you. Yeah. And that's pretty much everything I've got, I think, for this week. Yeah. So yeah, nice quiet one. I have a feeling next week might be a little bit more exciting, but we shall wait and see. In the meantime, have wonderful weekends, whatever it is you're doing, and I will talk to you again next week.